Organizational climate and culture represent the values of the organization's members, so they're the part of the organization we're referring to when we think about person-organization fit. At the same time, geographical culture influences the values of members. Understanding person-organization fit, then, requires understanding the types of culture and how they relate to one another. Technically, in reference to organizations, climate refers to the shared perceptions among employees, and culture refers to the beliefs and values communicated by leaders. In other words, climate is members' feelings about what the organization is like, while culture is reflected in leaders' and managers' messages about the organization. The difference can be about as clear as mud, though. That's part of the reason there isn't a learning goal about comparing and contrasting them. As the textbook mentions, too, we tend to use the terms as synonymous. Given that, you can use them synonymously in your work for this class as well. Given the definitions of climate and culture, you can probably imagine a number of ways that we can describe the different types. In this module, we'll be considering national or geographic culture, as well as organizational culture. While the two are related, they're different in a number of ways. We also use different models to describe the two. So if we're thinking about how to describe a particular culture, we need to start by thinking about which type we're describing. That said, and as you can imagine, there are enough variations that it seems to be a little tricky to sort organizations into a manageable number of categories or types. It appears one approach to that problem has been to categorize organizations on dimensions that are considered especially important. For example, in the 1930s, Lewin said that organizations could be categorized as either autocratic or democratic, depending on whether an organization's structure allowed for individual responsibility and risk-taking. If we fast forward a few decades, James and McIntyre said that climates could be described on 4 dimensions. Side note, it's interesting to notice the overlap between those dimensions and the antecedents of stress. The idea of multiple dimensions fits with current thinking. We'll look at one model for categorizing organizations known as the circumplex. It describes 12 different types of climate that can be grouped into 3 categories. Another side note, they use the term culture to describe those styles and the related measure, but the way they explain it fits more with the idea of climate. More specifically, they referred to shared behavioral norms and behaviors that members believe are required to fit in and meet expectations, which seems to relate to the shared perceptions of the work entity. We'll also look at a recently published article that suggests predetermined types of culture or climate might not be helpful, especially if we use a survey or questionnaire to determine an organization's type of culture. The proliferation of electronic communication options and the resulting archives provide qualitative data, and algorithms can identify the themes within that data to describe an organization's culture. The types of geographical culture can be as varied as the types of organizational culture. Unlike organizational culture, though, there is more consensus about the way geographical cultures can be described and differentiated. Hofstede's model seems to be the most common approach, with other theorists offering suggestions based on his model. The descriptions of the dimensions in Hofstede's model tend to be pretty straightforward, so I'll leave that to the textbook. The dimensions in Hofstede's theory represent a number of different values. That may increase person-organization fit when an organization's leaders develop a culture consistent with the region where it's located, and organizational members are from the same region. It may have already occurred to you, though, that many organizations aren't just in one location, and members can be from all over the world. In some cases, multinational organizations are the result of organizations merging or being bought out. In those situations, one organization is often dominant, referred to as the parent company. Members of the parent company typically follow into one of 4 patterns in adapting the organizational culture. When the parent's organization's values dominate or its members are ethnocentric, the cultural practices of the other organization are dismissed. In other cases, the approach is called polycentric, and the cultural practices of the non-parent organization are accepted along with those of the parent. In a regiocentric approach, the values and practices of the two would be combined. Another approach, referred to as geocentrism, would be to develop a completely new set of values and cultural practices. So what does this tell us about the relationship between geographical culture, organizational culture, and person-organization fit? It depends a bit on the characteristics of the organization, including its history. When an organization has one location, its culture is consistent with the region it's located, and organizational members are from the same region, it can enhance fit. If an organization has multiple locations, though, differences in geographical culture can create a bit of tension within the organizational culture, particularly if the locations span countries. That tension could make it more challenging for an employee to feel like they have a high level of fit. In those cases, though, the lack of fit might be identified before they accept a job, and the impact would be minimal. If the organization became a multinational, multicultural organization because of mergers or acquisitions, though, it can create a lack of fit. So, if we ask, what are the different types of climate and culture? First answer is organizational and geographical. We can also ask, though, what are the types of organizational culture and what are the type of national culture? The models provide a number of options for categorizing organizational cultures. Hofstede's model is the most common way of classifying geographical culture. Thinking about the ways to describe organizational culture and geographical culture also leads us to the question of how the two are related and how they influence fit. The short answer, and the reason to think more about it, is that they are all related, but how specifically they influence each other depends on a few variables.